Welcome to the Draft Professor Podcast Network. This is the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast. I would like to remind you of who is bringing you daily draft content. Randall Slifer, Josh Townsend, Jake Robertson, Bill Sparks, Parker Blake, Brock Vieira, Newt Weston, Devin Jackson, David Neese, Jacob Roach, Owen, Jared Zhang, Dean Bruce, Brian Maffey. Without these individuals, we could not bring you daily draft content covering the top 175 players in the NFL draft. Thank you for watching, and we'll be with you in a few seconds. Welcome to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast. I'm joined by Owen, Newt, and Josh. And Newt, what's going on with the Packers game right now?
I don't want to talk about it. Fumble Christian Watson, midfield. Great. That was just the worst timing possible, Jim.
So, yeah, I told Newt I didn't realize we scheduled the podcast at the same time as the Packers game. But he is pulling double duty right now. So we will all give Newt a round of applause. But Josh, how you doing?
Good. Glad to be with you guys. Owen, nice to meet you. Newt, nice to meet you guys. You guys are awesome at what you do. Been admiring you guys from afar. Diving in some O-line, D-line today. A lot of quality prospects we're going over and a couple of my favorite prospects in this draft. So ready to get into it.
Yep. How you doing, Owen?
Great. I missed the last show we did here. That was 2 weeks ago then, because last week was but this group we got here, I'm really excited about. I didn't have a lot of expectations. I knew a couple of the bigger names, but then coming into it and diving into it for some of the lesser known names I got into, I was actually pretty hyped up, especially with this interior O-line group we got going on. So I'm real excited to dive into this and excited to just talk about some big uglies.
Fantastic. Well, Owen, you want to kick off Tyler Booker?
Yeah, you got it. Tyler Booker, so he's one of the top names when it comes to talking about the O-line in this class. From Alabama. I was actually coming into this is probably one of the 2 or 3 names I knew from the list when I got it sent to me. And coming and watching it initially, I was kind of disappointed. Now, that's not to say he was the highest rated guy I watched of this group, because he does deserve that hype, deservedly. He's a big guy, 6'5", 325 for Alabama. He's been a 3-year contributor for them since his true freshman year. So he's a 3-year junior, looking probably most likely going to come out just because, most of the time those guys who are playing significant snaps or their true freshman year and then get to this point are looking to leave, especially from a place like Bama. For me personally, I felt he used his size well, especially in pass pro, absorbing contact, using his feet to mirror, and then take on defenders specifically, and not allow a lot of movement there. He moved pretty well for a guy his size. I was thoroughly impressed by that, and that's something you always like to see with these interior O linemen who are pushing that 330, have that bigger size, bigger frame, wider base. So if they can move and they can use that kind of size to their advantage, it's always a plus, and it's always going to be a boost for when you're looking at them to translate to the pros. The only thing I really had against Booker was that I really wanted to see him punish more guys with his power. I felt like, being the size he is and being able to absorb contact, he really could have been like one of those guys who you look at and it's like, that's a road grader. He beats people up. He's a people mover. And I felt like he did a good enough job in the run game to displace guys and neutralize defenders, but I didn't think he was really the guy who was going out and burying guys with the consistency that I would wanted.
I like that. I was just going to kind of add to that. I had the exact same thoughts when I was looking at him. Did a lot over summer scouting, just listening into a couple other sources, and I'm in my head, I'm like, man, this sounds like a first round guy, maybe a top 20 guard, one of those guys that we get really, really excited for. Not that interior offensive lineman's a position that you commonly see there, and so that was kind of special in my head. Expectations fell off a little bit from that. He wasn't awful by any means. He was, and I echo this too, he's the best guard and best interior offensive lineman I've seen in this group thus far. I really, really like him. I thought, like Owen said, he moved well. The only times I ever saw him get outrun were by Jalen Milroe, and you can't fault him for that. But yeah, I think there are some things where I see the Mauler mentality. I see that like want to punish you, but it's not always being executed. He's not always like just going through and having those, fantastic finishes to blocks. So it is really like there's something left on the table that I just wanted a little bit more from that. I think that he is, for me, like I'm as like a late first, early second, not a true first round grade, but I think he's got an opportunity to go in the top 32. I think he's going to be the first interior offensive lineman taken off the board. I don't think he's going to have any chance to play in tackle in the NFL, not swing tackle. But you draft this guy, you plug him in day one into one of those guard spots, and you forget it. And I know it's easier said than done, and not always the case, but I truly think that this is a guy that can step in and be an immediate contributor and shore up a team in that position. I think of someone, I don't think he'll fall there, but if you were to see him slip to day two, maybe might see the Bears like salivating, looking at this guy and be like, man, we might have found a guy that we can really, really use to shore up our line. And kind of some others that are in that area. But I really, everything that Owen said, kind of with that, maybe falling a little bit short of expectations, but still a fantastic player. Really, really understands the assignment, has good strength, good size, and someone that I did enjoy watching a ton. I'm looking forward to seeing a lot more with him at the next level.
No, absolutely.
Josh, how about you?
Guys, you guys hit it right on the head with Tyler Booker. I mean, he uses his length well. He gets into his anchor really easily for a guard. His consistency for me is the biggest thing that I saw on his tape. And obviously, you're not going to get the down Mauler mentality, even though he does possess that. This is a guy you can plug and play right away in the NFL. And not only will he be solid from day one, he'll be able to have room to grow into his body, into his when he gets to the pro level. And then let's say by the third year or so, he'll be way more comfortable, understand his assignments, translating from college to the NFL. And I think him playing under Nick Saban's system and then translating to Kalen DeBoer has really helped him out as well. He's really been a leader for that offensive line, not only for that whole offense, for that Alabama team. And that's something you got to take into consideration when you're scouting these prospects. He was a real pillar for them. Like you guys said, I think the only concern that I have is he's an average mover at best when you get him into space. It's not like it's a concern for him at all. It's average, but it's not something that's overly a strength for him in my mind. But this is a guy, as a Ravens fan, I've been manifesting going to Baltimore at like 28th pick. I'm like, for months now, I wish Tyler Booker gets to Baltimore. But like you guys said, this is the best interior offensive lineman prospect we're going to grade so far, at least on my board. And yeah, I really like what Tyler Booker brings to the table.
Okay, so all three of you have Booker as the number one interior offensive lineman on your boards?
As of right now,
I do.
Correct. I would be a little higher than Owen and Newt on Tyler Booker, but yeah.
Where do you have? Do you have like a true first round grade on him?
Yeah, I had top 25 grade on him, more around 20.
So, and like there's a lot, especially line positions for me that might move up and down. Right now on my big board, he's sitting 28, so he's like, just outside. Yeah, really, really, really close to that. My next guy, and I haven't gotten a chance to go back and look at him a ton, is Savania. And I think I'll have a better idea once I dive into the tape a little bit more on him. But he's a top 40 guy or top 50 guy. But he's still about a dozen spots back.
Yeah.
Because Brugler did not have Booker in his top 50 when he released it like a month ago. So
I thought that was kind of odd, tell you the truth, because I know he had Jackson really low too, and I think we talked that I wasn't super high on Jackson. I think he's a solid second round guy, but I didn't feel like he had a ton of love for interior offensive linemen. I know that Zabel made the list and a couple others, but I was really shocked to see to not see Booker on that list.
I think it was like a month ago. I checked PFF. They had him in the 70s going around the third round. I
saw that as well.
Okay. So next offensive lineman, Jaeden Roberts from Alabama. So Newt, you want to kick this one off?
Yeah. So you flip to the other side. Now we'll have hit all three interior offensive linemen for Alabama. So it really does go to show what this team gets year in and year out. So on the other side of Brailsford, you have Jaeden Roberts. Jaeden Roberts, 4-star recruit, redshirt junior at Alabama, 21 years old, 2-year starter. So him and Booker have spent a lot of time together on that offensive line. Probably made Brailsford life a lot easier too, sliding into that system. But I was able to check out the game against Wisconsin and Georgia. I'm going to be honest. I think I've watched that Georgia-Bama game from different angles about a dozen times now, just because of the talent that is between those two clubs. But I thought he did a really good job. Once again, I love watching games against Georgia because between Williams, Stackhouse, oh my God, why am I blanking? Jalen Walker, you're going to see some of the best talent for, rushing the passer and stopping the run. So I thought he did a really good job. My biggest beef with him is, he's this mammoth of a man. I was watching the all-22 angle of him. He looks like a comically oversized edge rusher to me. Like if you were to take an edge rusher and like in Madden and like up at 20%, he does. I'm serious. Like he's just like across the shoulders, his back. He's just like sculpted. And I think I heard a stat one time that he's got less than like 15% body fat. And I was like, that's ridiculous. There's no way. And then I see him. I'm like, no, that's factual. The guy's built. And I know that he made Feldman's freaks list for the amount that he can lift. You ask any guy on that Alabama team, like he is the strongest player there. And I didn't see it necessarily in play strength. I think some of it goes to technique. I think there's a lot of times where like he's ducking his head, he's lunging, and he wasn't able to utilize really any of that power because he didn't have a good base. He didn't have everywhere to move from. And it was kind of frustrating to see that and to see him waste that opportunity to, plant his feet, create a good base, and then just lay a guy out. Now, the reps do exist where he lights guys up. It's fun to see where he'll get out as a pull and guard and just lay a guy out. But it wasn't necessarily often enough, and there's a lot of things with technique to clean up. Now, looking at that, I'll take that any day. If you're talking to me, hey, this guy's got the physical build, he's got the tools, you just got to clean up technique, sign me up, because I think he's a guy that has all those things. He's playing in a really good system, and if he can get those things out of the way, keep his head up, engage players with his base and keeping up and not lunging, I think that he's going to be a steal where you take him. I think he's somewhere between second, third round. I have a third round grade on him right now. I see him kind of somewhere in that range. Just those tools, and you get him after Indy, I think his draft stock's going to go up because they're going to see the numbers that this guy puts up, and it's going to be freaky. So I have him third round grade. I like him a lot. I think he's going to be really good at that, but he's unpolished. He does have some work he needs to put in with the technical standpoint and technical aspects of his game.
Josh, what do you think?
So going over Jaeden Roberts, I relatively knew little about him going before I got into this. And for me, I think he flashed in leverage, using his leverage, his use of hands and power and gap runs. His gap runs and his ability to get into anchor easily, just like we talked about with Tyler Booker, were to highlight things for me. Like Newt said, I think this is a guy, if you set him for a couple years in the NFL, then you'll get not only an average starter in the NFL, but you get potentially more. And with interior offensive lineman prospects and building through the trenches in the NFL, that is huge for any general manager. So I can easily see this guy going in day two. Right now, I have a late third round grade to a fourth round grade on him. For me, his head was too low at times in pass protection. You want to see improved hand striking in pass pro. And for me, it's just a consistency thing. PFF isn't everything, but if you go over his PFF run versus pass, he'll either have a really good game in the run game and then a mediocre game at best in the pass game. It's only been 3 examples this year: Wisconsin, Vanderbilt, and Missouri, where he's put it together for all 3 games. And that, again, PFF's not the end all be all, but comparing the comparing the more consistent with Tyler Booker to Jaeden Roberts possessed more of the tools that you're looking for at the NFL level. He just got to put it all together. And then for me, again, I think more athletic 3 techs will win in pass rush with him, more twitchy, getting wrong his angles. I think he could do a little bit better job at mirroring, but I do like his mirroring skills when he's in base. Like I said, he gets into his anchor really well. So all the tools are there for Jaeden Roberts. I would not be mad if he goes early round 3. I think a team, especially after the combine, is going to look at all the tools and say, yeah, we can mold him into something somewhere like the Indianapolis Colts, drafting him in the day 2, sitting him for a year or 2, and then letting him take over. That would be ideal for him, a team like that. But I do like Jaeden Roberts, what he brings to his table. You just got to see the consistency more.
So, Owen, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm a little lower on him than you guys are. I have him solidly in that day 3 just because I didn't know. So I didn't know any of the background information heading into him. I didn't know about the Feldman list and everything like that. I did see the size there, and specifically that he was able to bring that power with him on film, especially with between getting to his anchor and moving guys off their spot. But I saw a lot of stuff with. First off, with lunging, as we mentioned earlier, where he's getting over top of his feet, he's a little toesy, and then he's able to, they'll use his momentum against him. So he's trying to go out there, he's trying to impose his will, which he does have the ability to do. He just gets over himself a little bit, and then smarter defenders are able to use that kind of against him. And I specifically was interested because I know kind of what we were talking about when it comes to, or what specifically Josh was talking about when it comes to quicker 3-techs and small, like some more of these dynamic pass rushers. So I watched the Wisconsin game, which was his all-around best game. And then I switched over. I was curious, so I put on the Tennessee game just because I wanted to see any of the matchups I could find between him and former topic of this show, Omar Norman Lott, because he was the guy we universally agreed was kind of this dynamic pass rushing specialist, kind of D tackle. And he did get paired up with him a bit, including in the run game, which we also agreed that he wasn't typically the best at that. And he really struggled. I feel like my biggest issue with Roberts right now is just I feel like he's a bit stiff. And when it comes to his change of direction and being able to come back and bend back around and pick up some of these later developing stunts and things like that, he's going to struggle a bit. And I don't fully trust him as an athlete to run NFL zone concepts consistently. I feel like he's going to be more pegged into that power gap scheme, which you're never going to run exclusively one style. So he's going to be forced to run some of those zone concepts. But I would beg to, I probably would, if I was going to be a team that's going to run that kind of scheme heavily in my run game, I probably would avoid him or take him a little bit later. So I felt like his versatility there lacked, but he does have some technique issues that can be cleaned up, and he has that natural raw power, and he does move good for a guy who's 6'5", 310 and is just jacked. So like there's a lot of things to like about him. He's just a bit more raw than I would prefer when it comes to somebody. And then I also see some limitations when it comes to the athletic profile that may limit what he can develop into, like what is basically what his ceiling is. I think there is a floor there. He's going to be an NFL lineman. You're not going to let this guy, go to a practice squad or make it all the way down to like the UFL or anything like that. He's going to be on a roster. I just don't know what my appetite is to see him as a starter long term in the NFL.
Yeah, I like what you said there. I mean, one of the notes I had down for sure was like slower feet. He gets beat by speed rushers, and I 100% agree with you there. I don't think this is a guy, and I think Josh said the same thing. I don't want to see this guy starting year one. I want to see him sitting. I want to see him learning behind a vet. Man, I'm just thinking if you could put this guy in a system where he's going either somewhere like Dallas or where you've got or the Cleveland Browns. Hopefully Bill's listening and pumping his fist up, but where you got a guy that's like a really seasoned vet like Batonio or anyone else that's out there that like you can sit there and you can learn behind, because this guy's got the tools. But you're right, like if he goes out there and he's pushed into it, thrust into it year one, he's gonna fail. I don't want to say for sure, but he's gonna struggle at least because he does not have those technical skills. So I absolutely agree with you there, Owen, for sure.
Yeah, and also I thought this was a funny point you brought up earlier about the Alabama-Georgia game, how that's kind of like your go-to game for this draft cycle. I cannot tell you, I lost count the amount of times I watched the LSU-Florida State game from week 1 last year with all the prospects in that game. I think I watched that one like 50 different times. There was like 2 D tackles on the LSU alone. There was like 3 D linemen for Florida State. That's not even getting into the quarterbacks and receivers that all got drafted.
Right, yeah.
And when we're covering offensive line and defensive line, and like I think in this episode specifically, we have a lot of SEC players.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure we're going to hear about like Walter Nolen going up against some of these guys or something. So that was dumb.
I mean,
that was not
you're going to hear
organize the list, but
you're going to hear Nazir Stackhouse later on. Like, hey, guess what? I was watching the Alabama-Georgia game because he's going against these 2 great guards. And it's like, man, every freaking time I'm turning this game on.
So, Josh, do you want to tell us about Jack Nelson from Wisconsin?
So Jack Nelson, tackle out of Wisconsin. I got him at 6'6", 5/10", 310 pounds with 33 and 5/8 inch arms. So prototypical size for the tackle position. That's one thing you see first when you pop on the film. Great length, prototypical size. Shows flashes and brilliance in pass protection for me, as well as run blocking and gap. Not the best with the tackle prospects, but he does show those flashes. He has wide hands, closes to the chest at times. Improved greatly as a pass protector this year compared to his other years prior starting. I loved his base and his 45-degree and vertical sets, allowing him to have good pass protection. That was one of the things that I highlighted in his scouting report and when I graded him. For me, he had solid use of hands. I think his hands are too wide when he gets out into his vertical sets. He doesn't bring them back into his chest enough. I think bigger run defender, defensive ends will cause problems to him just because of the the solid strength for him. I think he can add functional play strength at the next level due to that height and his length. I think he has room to grow in there. And then for me, 20 penalties in 2 years, I want to see that cut down just a little bit if you're going to have any time in the NFL. So right now, I project him as a day 3 pick with good depth. This is a guy that you can move in as a swing tackle or a spot starter if need be. He has the experience with Wisconsin. I think Green Bay just did something. But
yeah. Touchdown, Josh Jacobs.
There we go.
Let's go. Fantasy team, baby.
Same thing here. Sorry, Josh.
No, you're good. But no, Jack Nelson, I think he provides good depth on day 3. He can turn into an eventual average starter in the next level. I like the experience he brings, and then he's going to the Senior Bowl, I believe, so he's really going to show out there. I want to see the length on display right there and see if he can get it in his base and timing a little bit better. But definitely a good depth piece in day 3 for me.
And Josh, do you have him as a tackle? I heard you say swing tackle. You do.
I got him. He's one of the few guys I have as a pure tackle in this class. A lot of guys, especially like the higher end tackle prospects, I almost have all of them graded as guards. I'm not even gonna lie.
So, Owen, what do you think of Jack Nelson?
Yeah, Jack Nelson was actually one of the ones I was more pleasantly surprised about going into this. Again, I knew very little of the names that were thrown to me, so I kind of got a lot of first looks at these guys. So I watched 4 games on Jack Nelson, 3 of which were from this season where he was playing left tackle for Wisconsin. But then I went and checked his snap counts and realized that he was actually he had some starts at guard for Wisconsin back in 2021. So I went and checked out the Penn State game back in 2021 to get some look on him as an actual guard instead of trying to project everything as well, especially because this is more of the interior line thing. So I was kind of see if there's a case to make for that, which I do think so. I'm not there with Josh when it comes to just he's a pure tackle. I personally think I think that adds to his added value because he has the experience of playing tackle, especially in the Big Ten. I do think he has the size of that, especially. I think 6'7" might be a little too tall for a guard. I don't love it when they eclipse at 6'6". If he's 6'6.5", maybe a little shorter, I'd be a little more comfortable projecting him inside. Personally, I liked him a lot when it came to his movement skills, especially at his size. I felt like that was kind of his bonus there, was he was able to get out of the stance and, reach cross gaps and seal around, get his hips around and have show some flexibility there. Where I thought he got into issues and why I thought maybe tackle wasn't his most natural position was somewhat what Josh was talking about, is his hands, especially when he's getting into his vertical sets. He's more of the outside. He doesn't really keep his elbows in tight. And I do think that it negatively impacts how you perceive with his length. He may have the length of arms to be a tackle, but he lacks playing length. Like, he doesn't play with that. Specifically, I feel like it's because he's out in that more open space as a tackle, and he's trying to compensate for his lack of being able to get depth on that verticality with his sets. So I've seen a lot with some other guys that have kicked inside of NFL now, from guys I've eval in the past years, where they aren't the level of athlete to be able to get depth like that. They're not comfortable doing the flatter angles to get out and lining up wider. So they overthink it, and they're trying to make sure their feet are in the right spots, and they're not able to effectively use their hands and kind of mirror it up with that. So I think if he comes in and is a bit shorter, and I personally think he might not even have the arm length because of how short he played on tape. I mean, he's 6'7". If he is 6'7" or a true 6'6", he probably has it. But I've seen guys like Luke Tenuta come in with super short arms, but be 6'7.5" and not break that threshold. So I would like to see him as a guard, just to see, especially at the Senior Bowl, just to see if that stuff from the Penn State game, which was actually really good, where he played at true guard, can translate now after playing 2 years at tackle. But at the same time, I think he could be an NFL backup tackle, but I do think his best path forward is if he can somehow find a way to playing into a guard position in the NFL.
Newt, how about you?
So my experience with Jack Nelson comes more from what Josh said, the frustrations hearing him call his name every freaking game for a penalty while watching Wisconsin play. Wisconsin football hasn't been the greatest over the last 2 years. So I went in kind of with Owen. Like I was really actually sour towards him, just having that defeated nature of any Wisconsin football player. I was pleasantly surprised. Like when I just isolated him on tape, I did like a lot of the things that he brought to the table, but it's what these two guys talked about already. You know, Owen said 6'6.5" is his threshold. Man, if you're 6'6" at all for me and you're playing guard, you got to have a pretty damn good reason because that's already pretty tall. Like 6'5", 6'4", that's my sweet spot for a guard right there. And obviously, I mean, as long as arms you can get. But so he's really tall for the position, but I don't think he's going to project to be a starting NFL tackle. I think with the technical pieces that he needs to make up, as well as some of the just athleticism. When I looked at him against Oregon, he was just getting beat left and right by inside moves. Against Ugalele, I think it's going to be a really good prospect coming out next year or the following year. So it's no fault to him. But when he was asked to use his length and block in maybe more of a traditional pass set and look at a speed move or a power move on the outside, I thought he did okay. But anytime he got caught where there was an opening inside, he got exposed, and that's just going to be amplified at the NFL level. So he's kind of got this double-edged sword where he's not necessarily the greatest at tackle. He's maybe too big for guard, kind of creates that odd situation. I think he would be a really ideal player for a swing tackle, that 6 offensive lineman. You're never going to put him at center, but someone where you can plug in. It's not something that, hey, you're going to go be a career backup, but it can be, a path to the NFL where, hey, do you love the game? Do you want to be a part of something? I think Jack Nelson fits that mold. You go to, the other side of it, what's between the ears. He's played 2,300 career collegiate snaps. He's been a 3-time All Big Ten academic, 2-time honorable mention All Big Ten. He's got a good pedigree behind him. He's a smart player. He's a hard worker. He's got lineage. His father played at UW and in the NFL. So he's got all of the things, both on the field and off the field, that really do weigh in his favor. And I think he's a hard-ass worker, where I would take this guy and I would say, hey, this is kind of where we're at with you. We want you to be our 6th offensive lineman, or maybe our 7th offensive lineman. What can you do? What can you bring to the table to push yourself up from there? I think he would take it and run with it. And if he was continuing to be that guy, he'd still love his job every single day, walk in with a smile on his face and do what needs to be done. So I think he's a high character player that can bring something as far as a depth piece in the NFL is concerned. I don't think you'll ever see him on a starting 5 offensive line. But there's room for a player like that in the NFL. I got a 5th, 6th round grade on him right now, because I do think with that size, he does have some potential if you get the right coach under him. But I think he could be a depth piece for you. I think he's got a spot on an NFL roster, but he's definitely got to continue to put the work in for it.
Okay. My hand was moving too quickly there. Emmanuel Pregnon from USC. Owen, you want to take this one away?
Yeah. So Emmanuel Pregnon, it's another guy where I knew very little about him. So I did some background research to get, familiar with the guy before I started watching his film. Was a transfer over from Wyoming. He's a 5th-year junior because that COVID year makes it kind of odd when it comes to eligibility. So he technically can come back for another year, but he's most likely going to leave after this season. They do have some other guys on that roster that are looking to get some more playing time. So he might just take his solid season and move on from there. I was actually pleasantly surprised. Again, I think I already said that, but I watched this game against Michigan, UCLA, Notre Dame were the games I watched. So against some good competition, especially with USC moving over to, I believe they're in the Big Ten now this year, right? Yep. I know the whole conference thing got a little confusing there. But I watched them against this kind of higher level competition, especially the Big Ten, where we're expecting these kind of, grinded out, beefy lines on both sides. So USC not being historically in that conference and not being prepped for that kind of play, I was kind of concerned that he'd be someone who comes in and maybe isn't is a part of that line that is going to get bullied around the first year. And I feel like he, more than some of the other guys on his line, kind of held up, to my surprise, better than others. I did like specifically that he had some power. I think that's his best trait there. He has some good anchor and pass pro, especially against Michigan, where he's playing against some of these guys who are, round one, borderline top 10 players. He's able to absorb some of their contact, get some bodies moved. He is one of those guys I would describe as a people mover who, if he gets hands on to guys, he's going to be able to move them out of gaps and can stabilize that and kind of open up holes for running backs behind him. I feel like his movement isn't great. It's best when he's, asked to pull out and get to full speed and then transition that speed to power out in the boundary. But I feel like when it's asked to, get out and reach and flip his hips around to either get depth when his pass sets or seal off different lanes, I feel like he kind of struggles with the athleticism there. So he's a guy in a similar mode that we talked about with Jaeden Roberts earlier, where he's a very big guy with power, 6'5", 320. Can't really teach size there. But I still think he also has the issues where he's a bit stiff, has some trouble with change of direction, which kind of made me a little upset because I was really impressed with how well he was able to identify like blitzes and stunts with his, like, you can see he locates the correct man to go after, but he just struggled to get into position to make that block. So I like him a lot when it comes to a downhill run blocking offensive lineman, but I do think there's some holes in his game that I would like to see patched up. I don't know how much of that athleticism he can regain if like he gets into a weight program where he's able to drop a little weight and be able to move a little bit better. But I think from what you're getting, he could be like a borderline potential starter down the road where he can have a greater use of that power in some zone gap schemes. Or power gap schemes, I'm sorry. And I think he is fine as a pass protector right now, but he does have some physical limitations, which you'd have to insulate him between two pretty good pass blockers at the NFL level to really maximize what you get there and not have that be a liability.
Would you have on him for a grade, just out of curiosity?
Yeah, I had him with a 4/5 as opposed to. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna ask for what would you have Nelson at?
Nelson, I had him as a late day 2, early day 3, just because I felt like he had some movement, and with his size specifically, I know 6'5" is definitely more guard sized, but with Nelson, I felt like he had some good pad level, so I wasn't too worried about his height, but that was also without seeing him since he moved to tackle and getting more comfortable with those higher pad levels. So it's something that I am curious about, but I didn't knock him as heavily about that as say like what you guys were doing or what you guys were talking about.
No, that makes sense. So I had, like I said, I had Nelson around a 5th round at about a 5th round grade. I had Pregnon at about a 7th round grade. I guess I saw him a little bit differently. I didn't see him as a people mover. I thought he struggled to pick up stunts and twists. Number one, his kind of concepts along the line were get in front of a guy and, especially in like a chaotic situation, just do what you can. But a lot of times he seemed to be frazzled. I will say this as a caveat. I did watch the Michigan game and I did watch the Penn State game. So a little bit to there. I want to see him against those higher level defenses because that's what you're going to see at the next level. But with that, I really wasn't impressed with him against Michigan. The one thing I will say that stood out, he never got annihilated by Mason Graham. He never got annihilated by Kenneth Grant, but he definitely did seem overmatched consistently for me. I thought a couple things that I saw well, he's got a good mindset when engaged in a block. He's constantly moving his feet. He's trying to get over, move to be in a good position. I think that's what helps him out against some of those higher level defenders is he knows how to get himself around and be a nuisance. But I didn't see him as someone that's going to readily open up holes against a higher level defender, someone that's going to be in your face. You take a Nazir Stackhouse, you take last year T'Vondre Sweat, someone that's going to be up there and really, really dominant for us. You said he's got a year left. Yeah, he's got that odd COVID redshirt 2019, COVID 2020 year. I really think he should come back. I don't see him as necessarily someone that's going to lose anything by that. I think any reps that he can get would be amazing, because to me right now, he's a really vanilla player in this class, and someone that, take him or leave him. I think he can make a roster. I've got a grade on him for, being on the 53-man roster, but it's not necessarily a great grade for that. So I was definitely lower on him than you. Like I said, I had a 7th round grade. He's someone for me that's just he's another player, flashed a little bit, but definitely no one that stood out overly to me.
So Josh, what do you think?
So sorry to burst y'all's bubble, but I do think he's coming out this year. He took a Shrine invite, and he does have time to return to school if he wants to, and that could be beneficial, because right now I'm with you guys. I have a day 3 grade on him, a little bit higher than you knew. I have around a 5th round grade on him, right? Okay. Eerily similar grades to where I had Jack Nelson, but you got to give it to him this year. Well improved in pass protection compared to his other years. Like you guys mentioned, if you watched the Michigan game, even though he wasn't moving Mason Graham or Kenneth Grant off the spot by any means, he was holding his own, and that's something a lot of offensive guards can't say going up against both of them this year. Second team all Big 12, thick frame with a wide base. He has natural strength and anchor. For me, like we've talked about with Booker and Jaeden Roberts, this guy is not a guy that you want in a zone/space blocking scheme. He just doesn't have the lateral agility movements when he gets to the second level, or you get him out in space. Now, if you pull him around and he gets to full power, like Owen said, yeah, he'll be able to make contact and move people off the spot, but this isn't the guy you'll be asking to go on those outside zone runs and really displace people, flip his hips, make a seal block. But I think he brings a solid floor in gap runs. He loses his balance at times. I want him to improve overall as a run blocker for a guy that has that strength profile. I think for him, his role in the NFL, if he gets there early on, is a goal line offensive lineman. That 6th, 7th offensive lineman. You can move him inside, move the tackle to the outside. He'll be able to move people off the line. When I watched Notre Dame tape recently against Riley Mills, he did that almost effortlessly with good leverage, with that play strength. You saw it right away, and that's
I saw did you see that? I saw the clip of him. I mean, I'm eating all my words. Riley Mills is like one of my highest graded prospects, or like my guy, and I'm bashing Pregnon, and he did a really good job against Mills.
Yeah, that's
Josh. As soon as you said Riley Mills, I noticed like Newt's head turned, like that was one of his guys. I remember
it is. I gotta give to him. I did see exactly what Josh was talking about. I was like, damn it. And same thing. We're gonna talk it too, and I'll be the first one to say with our next prospect. But yeah, there's a couple ones. I totally agree with you. I thought he actually showed up pretty well there.
But no, you see what he's good at. You see what he brings to the table in the NFL. He needs to obviously improve as a run blocker. I think he needs to improve his hand striking in both run and pass, so he can get into that good anchor effortlessly more often. But I do like the improvements he's made from 23 to the 24 season. I think this is definitely a draftable guy. And once NFL teams get their eyes on him in the Shrine Bowl, they're going to see that size. They're going to see that wide base, his length, and they're going to be like, okay. So he might start moving up boards, whether you like it or not. Right now, I have a firm 5th round grade on him. I think he should stay there. But if you start seeing chatter about him in the early 4th round, don't be surprised just because of that size profile.
Yeah, especially with the Michigan game. That was one of the things I wrote down a lot in my notes when watching that game through was I was just I felt like he was able to hold his own against those kind of top tier guys. And I don't think he's a top tier guy in the slightest. Like I said, I have him in the 4th, 5th. I think I'm closer to a 5th, kind of similar with you, Josh. But I felt like he wasn't able to sustain blocks. And that was kind of infuriating to me because it's like you got the size and the strength profile to be able to hold up against these guys, hold up against NFL caliber D tackles. But he was just getting a bit of leaning and getting over his toes and not being able to get into that block. And I feel like a lot of the times when he was able to move guys, it wasn't really technically the reason. It was mostly because he is tenacious and he has that kind of higher effort. Newt, for you specifically, I would think if you can ever get hands on it, the USC versus UCLA game, he made number 92, who was like I looked it up afterwards. I think he's like between 310, 320 pounds. He was just making him his you can guess what I was.
You know what?
Yeah, for the whole game, like he was just moving that guy around, and he actually surprised me a little bit in that game because he was able to make some pretty solid second level blocks against some backers in that game as well. It's one of his better games. I think it's the best game of the 3 I watched. I watched Michigan, UCLA, and Notre Dame, and Notre Dame was the one where I really saw him as a puller. He was, I think, number 44 is the edge there, and he was just blowing him up like 3 or 4 times that game. So he had some flashy plays when he was going against that top tier guys, which he's going to face in the NFL if he ever does crack his starting lineup, which I'm not projecting it in the slightest, but I feel like there is a pathway there with his size and what he showed. But when he's facing those guys, I felt like he was able to like neutralize it, if not just not get absolutely embarrassed. And when he was going against guys who are going to be your more standard rotational defensive tackle players that you're going to see in the NFL, he's able to stand out a little more against those guys.
No, it's fair. I like the call for the UCLA. And I know especially rivalry week, anything's going to invite that. So, no, I got to check it out. I know I'm a little bit lower on him. I do agree with what both you guys are saying. It's just for a guy like that, I think that, I don't know. It's just it's something where I wanted to see more from him. Left a lot on the table, and I don't know how much more I'm going to see from that throughout the Senior Bowl and Indeed. But I'm looking forward to it. I'm like Josh is saying, if this is a guy that balls out, I'm going to be watching the Senior Bowl. I won't be privileged to be down there like others, but if I can see some sweet tweets from Josh filming him, that'd be awesome. And I'd love to see that kind of grow. I'm rooting for the guy. I love seeing not a JUCO kid, I'm sorry, but a guy transferring from a smaller school up to USC, making the most of that collegiate process. So yeah.
So, and Josh, you said he's going to the Shrine Bowl, right?
Yeah, he's going to the Shrine.
Yep.
Oh, Shrine Bowl. Never mind.
Okay. So Newt, you want to kick off Armaj Reed Adams from Texas A&M?
All right, so I'm gonna kick him off by saying that. Just going back to my love for Riley Mills. Josh, you weren't here for this. Riley Mills is like I'm gonna get one of the fat heads of him. He's gonna be on my wall. I don't care what team he plays for. He's gonna be one of my favorite guys in the draft. I love him. I think he's awesome. I think he's fun to watch. But there's a clip out there that exists. I tweeted it out of Armaj Reed Adams destroying Riley Mills, and it broke my heart. And I was like, damn, that's just, I gotta like check the box a couple times for this guy. He's a 3-star recruit. He's a redshirt junior, spent 4 years at Kansas. And then this last year he's transferred over to Texas A&M, 23 years old, not old, but starting to kind of get a little bit old. Offensive lineman, though, you can play into your 30s, mid-30s, depending on your ability to consistently make a roster. So it's not like you're looking at that as a negative, but not the youngest prospect out there. He was against Arkansas. He wasn't an impact blocker, I'd say. He was pushed back on a fair amount. He did seem to move really well to the second level, though. I loved him in space. I thought that his ability to create a rushing lane was really, really good. If you take a look at his grades, I think his run block grade and pass block grade per PFF match up really, really closely. It's nice seeing a guy like that, someone that's consistent in both. You hate having a guy that like, oh man, he's a great pass blocker, but he sucks in the run. But I think he's one that does that. Consistently across the board. When I was watching him, I thought he did a really good job opening up rushing lanes. For me, one of the things that he needs to improve on in that regard is just sustaining blocks. I thought he did let defenders disengage too quickly and wasn't necessarily able to allow a runner to get through the lane and, come through clean the other side and start to reach that second level, third level. With this, I like him. I think that he's another player that has the ability to, a couple years down the road, find himself a starting spot. I've got him as a year 3-4 starter. A little lower on that scale, not necessarily someone that I'm like, man, give him a year and then boom, pop him in there. But someone that has the ability to, at some point, find himself to a starting line. He's got great size. I think he's just around almost the exact same size as Pregnon, a little bit heavier, but I think he wears it really well. And right now I've got a 5th, 6th round grade on him. But I think he's going to be someone that has the ability to step in there and push for a starting spot after a handful of years of coaching.
Mm-hmm. Josh, what do you think?
So when we're talking about Reed Adams, this is a guy who has a lot of tools in the toolbox, kind of like Jaeden Roberts, but he has to put it all together. For me, he's a really big body guard. He has very good play strength. Out of all the people we're talking about today, I think Reed Adams has the best play strength out of all of them, which is saying a lot. He loves to finish his blocks with his strength. The biggest thing that I love to see out of Reed Adams was his recovery speed in pass pro. When he loses the angle and gives up the inside swim, he's able to recover with his feet, and that was really surprising for a guy that big because his name of the game I'm going to disagree with Newt on this. I think he's an average zone space blocker at best, but that's just give or take. Different guys seeing different things. I think for me, it's his mental processing. I don't like offensive linemen with a shit ton of penalties. It is what it is. Just like Jack Nelson, 20 penalties in the last 2 years. He has a bad habit of lunging and losing balance and pass protection. And like I said, his play strength is the best in this class that we're talking about with these 6 guys. His use of hands in both run and pass is the worst by far out of all the 6 players we're talking about. So we're talking about the highs of the highs and the lows of the lows. A lot of tools are there for Reed Adams. He just got to let it sit there for a couple years and really learn how to stay in his base and use his hands properly and just not relying on strength to win all the time. But with his strength, again, he has a good anchor. He has good gap blocker when he stays in phase. I like what Reed Adams brings to the table. I love his strength profile. I got to improve the penalties, got to improve the use of hands and pass protection for me. I got a 4th round grade on him, but this is a guy I wouldn't be surprised though in a couple of years if he turns into an above average turn. I'm like, why the hell did Reed Adams go in the 4th round? Oh yeah, because he couldn't sustain blocks at the 2nd level for his life. So I want to see a lot more out of Reed Adams. I really do think he has it in there, but it's just he's just got to put it all together.
So Owen, what do you think?
So I came out of watching Reed Adams, and I think I'm gonna plant my flag in the ground as this is one of my guys in this class. This was the one that got me super excited because he was like the 2nd or 3rd guy I watched in this group of 11, and it just got me fired up to watch the rest of these guys. I'm kind of in between the both of you. I agree with some parts of what you both said, and I disagree with some parts of what you both said. Personally, I'm more on the Newt side when it comes to him as a mover, especially when it comes to reach blocks, getting around ceiling. I did like when he got to the 2nd level, even though they're not as sustained, you're not seeing him bury 2nd level defenders. I do think he does fall off blocks sometimes when it comes to not being able to bring his lower body with him, which is more so I think he's looking to get that knockout block. He really does play with an edge there, so he likes to throw that weight around. And I feel like he does get to a point where he's able to knock off balance and not able to sustain those blocks. But when he gets to that 2nd level, he's able to throw key blocks and was able to show up when it comes to opening up lanes, and was one of the guys who I felt the most confident when it came to where I could see him slotting into and being more of the obviously we saw Thomas Bucker earlier, but after him and maybe when we get to Gray later, I feel like Reed Adams, Gray's another one of my guys in this group we did, but Reed Adams, when I can see a pathway to him becoming a starter, I really I can't understate how much I did think he moved great for his size, being 6'5", 330. I do think he surprised me also in pass protection, especially with his footwork, being able to mirror and match. Some of these guys try to hit him with some inside counters. And while I don't love his hand technique, and I do agree with Josh with that, where I felt like his initial punch was just not there. And when guys who knew what they were doing, it came to being a pass rusher, were able to get into him, he struggled to react to that, and then got called for a lot of penalties because of that. But when he was going against someone who also didn't have a plan, didn't have that first initial attack to get in front of his punch, or what the lack thereof, he was able to mirror and match and kind of get some hand fighting in there to sustain some pass blocks more so than I thought he would be able to. So I came into this looking at the size of him, thinking he was going to be this kind of bigger, slower, lumbering guy, and I was pleasantly surprised by how well he moved on tape, especially with those kind of further zone blocking schemes. And when he was moving to the 2nd level, I did like him a lot there. I don't think now, Josh, I do like that you took a swing with this, but I wasn't the biggest fan of his power. I felt like he did generate movement. But for me, because maybe it was his lack of sustained blocks, I felt it was more because he had speed. He has the size and weight, and he has some movement. So the force he's able to generate with that was more due to his speed and get off combined with the amount of weight he has. Because for a lot of guys, especially with some of the other guys we talked about previously, they're able to latch on and then get some movement post that where they're already locked in. Whereas I felt like Reed Adams, where he got most of his push was when he was coming off of his movement ability and being able to block while on the move there and still have that size while moving. So I agree with some things. I disagree with others between you guys, but I'm definitely the highest. I have him in the 3rd round. I think he just that size movement matchup there, and as well as being someone who I felt was further along when it came to his footwork and pass protection, really got me excited. Personally, as a Buffalo Bills fan, the struggle for me was I was watching this guy last night, and I I'm watching like this guy. I would, if I'm a Miami Dolphins fan, I'm salivating. Him next to Aaron Brewer would be amazing. And I'm like, well, I really don't want that to happen as a Bills fan, but as a draft guy, I want that to happen so bad. It's just, I was so happy about it. And I couldn't really contain it. I was like, oh, I had to work this morning at like 4 a.m. I watched him at like 9, and I ended up staying up to 11 watching the rest of these guys here, just because I was getting so amped up from, this is the one who really kicked that into gears here.
Uh-huh.
Hey, I got something I want to bring up with him, and maybe a little bit more. Definitely something for like Owen and Josh. I don't know if you got a chance to see this. I know that. So he spent the 4 years at Kansas. One of the years was pretty much a wash, just because he got injured almost immediately. And he stepped in his freshman year, and he was a player there. If you look at, and I'm not saying it's end all be all, but we look at PFF occasionally for those pieces. You look at his PFF grades at Kansas, and they're very middling. Average blocker, maybe even a little bit below average blocker. And then you see this year, and he's pushing not elite blocking, but he's a very, very solid blocker. How much weight do you guys take into that? Because I know that stood out to me right away. I was like, whoa, that is noticeable to go from, very average to below average scores to really good scores the minute you change systems. Do you attribute that to coaching, to the players around him, or just something where he was at a detrimental program?
I would say for me personally, it's both coaching and the players he's going up against in practice every day. Let's be real. Mike Elko has done wonders for that Texas defense. Even though they haven't put it together for a full 12-game season, you see what Elko brings to the table with Texas A&M. And then the people he's going up against every day in practice, Shamar Turner, Nick Scorton, Shamar Stewart. There's more guys after that have limited experience but have like 80-inch arms or some shit like that. Like Texas A&M's got a bunch of dudes on that defensive line, and he's had to grow up right away. Because in Kansas, he's had the time the couple of years before that with the injury, his freshman year, to really get acclimated. You saw sometimes they would move him out to the slot and then move at Kansas, moving out on the slot, and then have him pull all the way around in a motion and then come around. Kansas did whatever they wanted with Reed Adams instead of really developing him into who he needed to be as a pro prospect. And I think Elko has done wonders with Reed Adams this year. But I think for me, it's coaching and then players he's going in practice.
Okay.
I've seen Reed Adams in the top 100 of at least one board. So, Owen, you're not alone in that. I think it was Kyle Krabs, but I'd have to go back and double check. But I saw a board somewhere that had Reed Adams in the top 100.
That was what last night when I was watching him, when I got that kind of eureka moment about him going to being a fit for the Dolphins. I tweeted at Kyle. Because me and him had a couple interactions on Twitter. And I was like, what's your temperature on him going to the Dolphins? Because I feel like this is kind of my best fit so far of the guys I've watched, which is limited to say the least. But I did really like that. And to answer your question, Newt, I did actually go back and watch a 2023 game of his while he's at Kansas, just specifically to see some tackle tape because he did play tackle a little bit there. And it's hard to chalk up between whether or not it was because of coaching there or because he was out playing tackle, but his technique did definitely take a step up from when he was there at Kansas to now where he's a guard at Texas A&M. I think he just got better coaching. He has better guys insulating him on either side, obviously compared to what he had at Kansas, even though there was some draftable guys on that offensive line last year for Kansas. Yeah. But he's also now playing against SEC level defenses. And so even though he's having that kind of insulation, he's going against better guys in practice. He's going against better guys, on a regular basis. So he's getting this uptick in grades, but also going against the best competition he's faced consistently in his career. So it's kind of something I would say, even more as a positive than anything.
No, that was kind of like my thought as well. Looking at where the Big 12 is now, scratching their way into the college football playoffs. Mm-hmm. It's not the same as it was. So that makes sense. Jim, just to kind of add on, I know this was as of the 23rd of October, but PFF has them as number 95 on their board. So just putting another tick for Owen in his belt.
Okay, so I already have forgotten where we were in the rotation because we're all asking each other questions. So, Josh, why don't you kick off Gray Zabel?
So I'm not going to be the best guy to kick off Zabel because compared to consensus media, I'm going to be a little bit lower on him, but I still have him as a top 100 prospect. Don't get me wrong. Tall, athletic, North Dakota State, full-time starter. He's a smooth mover, mirroring defenders well, getting into the second level easily as a run blocker. Zabel gets displacement often to stay his box. He's very good in space. That was the one thing that I saw in him compared to the rest of these guys. He's, in my opinion, the best mover in space with these guys. The thing with me, for Zabel, I want to see functional play strength added to him, and I think he has room to add that to the next level. And we'll see it in the Senior Bowl, whether he'll be able to hold up against power or not, because yes, North Dakota State, they are the powerhouse of the FCS, but he's only going up against the best competition that he is. And I watched the Colorado tape, and his movement skills, second level, were very, very impressive. Don't get me wrong. It's one of the best in this draft class, and that's why he'll get drafted high. For me, a lot of people have him as either a tackle or a guard. I personally have him as a guard, 32 1/4 inch arm length. You can only survive so long with that play strength and that arm length outside as a tackle. So for me, I have him translating to a guard, but I know a lot of people like sticking him out of tackle. But position flexibility along with that movement space, I love his mental processing. I love his athletic ability, one of the more athletic offensive linemen in this draft class. And the FCS hype is warranted. I know Jim Nagy's on record saying that he's got his money on Zabel being the first FCS guy going out in this draft class. For me, personally, no, I'm a David Walker guy out of Central Arkansas, and I'm slamming the table for him to go round 2. That's a different conversation for a different day, but I love what Zabel brings to a table. I got a 3rd round grade on him, firm day, round 3 grade. I don't see him going out of the top 100. He'll definitely get drafted higher than that. He's on a lot of people's top 50 boards, and I understand why.
So, Owen, what do you have on Zabel?
Yeah, Zabel, another guy, like you guys are saying there, he's on top 50 boards. I have stayed away, specifically some just out of laziness, but also when I got the list, I usually try to avoid looking at what other guys have opinions on him until I get a first look at him at least. So I didn't really know the whole situation around Zabel. I do know that North Dakota State is that powerhouse, and I saw he was listed 6'6", 305. And watching him, I'm in the camp that thinks he's a tackle, but that is with a caveat. So personally, I liked him a lot as an athlete. I watched the Colorado game, the Tennessee State game, which was, for some reason, the Tennessee State game was significantly graded lower than his Colorado game, even though they were both pretty solid. And then I watched a game, Maine in 2023, because the first few weeks of that season, he was their starting guard before getting kicked out to tackle for the rest of that season. So I wanted to see him with some reps at guard to see which position I would have preferred him based off just the tape. And I feel like he did perform really well at guard specifically. And I do like a lot about him. His movement's great. I did like in the Colorado game specifically his movement, and also the fact that while playing a tackle, he was able to get downhill, get across different gaps for reach blocks for one, but also was able to wash down some of these D tackles and some of the D ends that Colorado had out there, which is a much higher level of competition than what he's playing in every other game when he's at that level, especially because they are like that cream of the crop. He was able to hold up and not look out of place while at that level of competition. So everything I saw at North Dakota or at the FCS level translated to that game against Colorado. I know it's a limited sample size with just the one game, but his movement, his ability to wash players down, have some power, sustain some blocks with his footwork, I did like all of that. The only thing I had against him was projecting him to tackle. I wasn't aware what his arm length is. I'm still holding out whether or not I'm going to fully commit to him being an interior lineman or office tackle until we get some of those Senior Bowl measurements in and the combine measurements in, just to make sure we got some exact numbers here. Because I'm specifically looking to see if his arm length does match up, because even if he does have the arm length, I still have question marks because he wasn't playing with length, kind of similar to what we were talking about with Nelson earlier, where if he has the length, he's not using it properly. And it's a lot of the issues I have with him as a tackle is that use of his length and his arms, which negatively impacted how he's able to anchor down and protect his chest, and was able to sustain some blocks at some higher levels, especially when he's trying to get outside of his frame. So I do think he could play tackle the NFL if his arms do check out. If at worst, I think he's somebody who could pinch hit at tackle. You would be more comfortable with him at guard, especially if those arms don't measure out. And then the one last thing I had was I really liked him as kind of this new wave of NFL offensive tackle technique, where you have these guys similar to like a Deion Dawkins for the Bills, for reference, where he's lining up 2 yards outside the guard and up close to the line of scrimmage and taking these more flat angles to the pass rushers, because they want to be able to get their hands on these defenders immediately without having to get the depth first. I don't think he's fantastic when getting depth. I think he's perfectly fine doing that, and that's why I'm comfortable with him as tackle. But I did think I noticed a lot where he felt way more comfortable getting flatter and getting hands-on immediately, which also kind of leans towards him kicking inside to guard, where he's able to get that more consistently instead of having to change alignments and stuff like that at tackle.
My assessment's not going to be anything stellar because it literally mirrors your guys's. I got him as a top 100 guy. I don't have him as a top 50 guy. Right now, I'm a little bit higher than Josh. I got him as a mid to late second rounder, but like more towards that late second round. I do like him. I thought, once again, the Colorado game, I thought he was awesome. I really liked his ability to, and I talked about this with Carson Vincent or any HBCU, FCS guy that you bring up. Are you dominating your competition? Yes. And he's doing that. Like you talk about any guy that's at that level, they have to dominate, and he is dominating. You see them at an FBS level, and he continues to be a really, really good player. So not to, go over everything again and again and again. I think he's a guard at the next level. That's where I'm at. I'm a little bit more aligned to Josh. The two weaknesses I had against him were I thought his anchor was susceptible a little bit to bull rushes. I thought I saw him get pulled back. Once again, he didn't get flopped over. He was able to maintain integrity, but every now and then when he was able to expose, or when not able, but when he exposed his chest, he was susceptible to bull rushes. And it was already said his frame does need a little bit of bulking up. At 6'6", 305, you need to put a little bit more meat on the bones, need to be able to set that anchor a little bit better, which will then help with that bull rush. But movement skills, really, really good. Everything that he did at tackle at the FCS and the FBS level when he was asked to play there, I loved. So I'm not concerned with this guy's ability technically or his ability to be an athlete. It's just getting a little bit stronger, moving into a maybe more appropriate position at an interior offensive lineman. And then, honestly, give him maybe a year. I think he's going to be ready to go for the NFL level. Like I said, I got a mid to late second round grade on him. I've got him graded ahead of Jaeden Roberts right now, and behind Donovan Jackson, who we talked about first week.
Yeah, I don't think I mentioned it, but I have him as a late second here, so I have him behind Donovan Jackson, but ahead of guys like Reed Adams and some of the other guys we talked about in this episode already.
Cool. So before we switch to the defensive side of the ball, let's give everybody here a chance. Owen, tell them who you are, how they can find you.
Yeah, my name is Owen McCullough. I have a YouTube channel, which I have been posting to sparingly. I've been kind of busy recently, but I do have some stuff on there where I talk about draft content. I was really heavily into it last year. I'll probably ramp up more towards the draft cycle this year when it gets to the springtime in 2025. But I do make content over there on YouTube at Weekly Huddle. I have a Twitter at Weekly Huddle. I'm really active there. I follow and I'm active in some different of these podcast communities, so I'm always free and available to have conversations and talks about draft prospects and stuff like that.
Newt.
You can find me on Twitter, NFL Draft _Weskin. Everything that Jim does with putting together all these podcasters, all these guys are awesome. I love interacting with them. Great to meet Josh for the first time. It's been amazing for the first 6 players that we've gotten to talk about together. Truthfully, I can definitely see where he's going through that scouting school, talking about a lot of the really technical aspects of these interior offensive linemen. I'm taking notes as this episode's going on the things that he's saying. Man, I didn't even think about that. So love that. Also run zerotechdraft.com, ranking players throughout the cycle, writing up player scouting reports throughout the entire draft cycle, and then doing rankings for positions as well. Give it a chance. Give it a look if you get a chance. Like I said, zerotechdraft.com.
So Josh.
So you guys can follow me at juice_T23 on Twitter. That's where I'm going to be active the most. Once the college season ends, you're going to start seeing my positional rankings. And then if you ever want to see my scouting reports, I'll have them written up as the college season goes on. And you can also tune in to all the Misses Are Relevant podcasts, with the running backs and linebackers that I do with Jake every Monday. So go check that out. And then also for you guys, if you guys are ever interested in learning what we're talking about or how to do this yourself, Dan Hatman of the Scouting Academy runs an amazing program that you'll get a 16-week course and you'll learn the ins and outs of pro scouting, what to look for in each position. So if you guys ever want to get into this, what we're doing, what we're talking about, and really better yourself, go to scoutingacademy.com, sign up from there. Dan Hatman is a great guy and he'll help you all the way through it.
So I definitely appreciate all three of you joining. And normally the format is only two people. I wanted to just make sure that Josh and everybody and Newt and Owen were meeting everybody, because while we're all in like a group chat, it's completely different when you see somebody's face or hear their voice.
Yeah.
So with that being said, Newt, do you want to kick off TJ Sanders from South Carolina?
I'd love to kick off TJ Sanders from South Carolina. Let me just pop over my defensive notes. All right, so TJ Sanders, this is his fourth year at South Carolina. He's a 3-star recruit, 21 years old, 2-year starter. He's third team all SEC in 2023. I got to give kudos to South Carolina. Their website and writing up player profiles, wonderful. He earned the nutrition award at South Carolina in 2023. I don't even know what that means, but I know he earned it because South Carolina is so good at promoting what their players do earn. They got all their banquet awards up and everything. So I was like, this is amazing. I gotta give kudos here. He, of all of the interior defensive linemen that we broke down, it felt like a lot of these guys fell into either you're a pass rusher or you're a run stuffer. And I know that, that is kind of how that defensive position a lot of times will tend to lean due to some of the nature of the ability for defenses to swap packages and so on and so forth. So he's got really stellar grades for run defense, but he's got a lean frame on him. If you look at him, he's 290 pounds, 6'4". So you look at him and you look at those numbers, you're like, man, this guy's probably a great pass rusher. Still a good pass rusher. Don't get me wrong. He doesn't stand out there necessarily as compared to his run stuffing ability. He's going to be someone that knows how to use that length. When you look at him, he's 6'4" for an interior guy. He's a multi-sport athlete. He played basketball and he played multiple positions in offense. His lighter frame allows him to be explosive off the line. He's really, really quick, gets into the offensive lineman's chest very, very fast, as opposed to some of the other guys that we're going to talk about, where he wants to be there. He wants to have that fight. He wants to take it to them. And it's something that, and it might be more me, but I really, really like that. I like a guy, especially on defense, that wants to go out there and he wants to get after it. He's not willing to wait, sit around and dance, try to make something happen. He's going to take the fight to the offensive lineman. And I thought that was awesome. I wrote down he's wildly competitive on third downs. I think this guy, he's a player at the end of the game. He wants to be out there. He wants to fight, and he wants to show what he can do. You put him in a high-pressure situation, I think that's one where really he flourishes the most. With him, what I wrote, some negatives, he's got to be a better tackler. Just a couple situations, he's got to wrap up the ball carrier. He's such a good run defender where he gets the ball carrier. There's just too many times where he's not allowing that ability for him to get there to come through with just a solid wrap-up tackle. Able to still generate good power with the frame. Liked his ability to do a bull rush, to utilize a long arm. He's got 23 probably more than that. As when I wrote this up, he had 23 pass rushes. He's got a pretty good actually pass rush win percentage. But like I said, I think he makes a lot of his money in that run game. He's someone to me that can be that 3-down lineman as you get some more technical refinement to his game. You give him some more pass rush moves. I think he's got the mindset. He's got the athleticism. You just really have to work with him on some of those technical skills and give him some moves where he can beat those interior offensive linemen and get after the quarterback a little bit more. Right now, I've got him as a third-round grade, pretty solid third-round grade. Someone that I liked a ton, a lot more than I thought I would going in, especially.
Josh, how about you?
So going into, I was really looking forward to watching both TJ Sanders and Talker Hemingway. We didn't get to talk this time around, but TJ Sanders was more than fine enough to watch for him. This is a twitch up inferior defensive lineman with good plate speed. I like his get off and bend, especially around more starter offensive guards. He brings alignment versatility to the table. I know in the first half of his season, he kind of calmed down with his pass rush efficiency rate, but at the first half of this season, he was one of the top interior defensive linemen at pass rush run rate. It was around 20% or something like that. I think it was second or third in one of the things I saw. His length is plus next level in the NFL. Like Newt alluded to, you want to see improved tackling. You want to see more consistency because he's really impressive when he's stacking cheddar. One-on-one blocks, especially in the run game, he's really quick to get off those blocks. Good use of hands. For me, it's a solid strength. He doesn't win much with bull rush. He could improve the lower body strength. Doesn't mean he has to add weight, just showing that he can win more with a bull rush instead of using more finesse. That's just nitpicking a little bit. And then the only thing I can see him struggling with at the next level is duo runs, double team runs coming after him just because of that lighter frame. Even though he's at 290 compared to the rest of these interior prospects we're talking about, he'll be able to get moved off the spot in double teams with those duo runs and those gap schemes. So I have a firm day 2 grade on him. I have an early third round grade on him, top 70 player on my board. And he's a really similar player to Walter Nolen we're talking about later in the episode. It's just one's got a little higher ceiling, one's got a little lower ceiling in my mind. I want to see improved play strength, especially at the lower half against double teams, but really like his stack and shed ability, really like his get off. And somebody's going to be really happy with TJ Sanders on third downs, especially year one in the NFL.
So, Owen, how about you?
Yeah, I basically don't have much else to add here. I will say that I haven't graded higher than both of you just because I feel like I am valuing that he has the ceiling that comes with the twitch up level, twitch up athleticism. He has that get off, he has the bend, he has the ability to chase down the line of scrimmage, especially and make plays from the back end, and has that motor that runs hot the entire time. These guys who are bigger guys who are going to be getting plays that are avoid them with outside rushes and jet sweeps and things like that. They're going to need to have that want to go down that line of scrimmage and make those plays. I love how he's able to combine his plus length, especially for even an NFL prospect. Like he's going to have plus length when he gets to that level, and has heavy hands, has some strength in the upper body to be able to control and manipulate the point of attack, get his eyes off the blocker and to find the ball in the backfield and be able to commit to the run with proper timing, not have to get off the block too early or too late to be able to make plays. It's just going to be, finishing plays like that. He's putting himself in position to do so. It's just what we talked about with tackling and things like that. And the only thing that's keeping him from being a higher, like I have him as a low second, so a borderline third. The only thing that's keeping him from being like a solid, like pushing, like knocking on the door of the first, getting higher in the second is going to be that core strength. I think he's like everything else. If he's not amazing at it when it comes to like pass rush and some of the other things that he struggles to do with consistency, it's more just he's still at a good level playing there, and he can always improve that slightly and get to one of the better players in those fields. But his core strength specifically is something that I think he's actively poor at. He's able to get moved off the spot. If he doesn't take a guy on head on with his arms and doesn't get hands on immediately, he's able to get pushed around a little easier than I would liked, which is kind of the fear you have when a guy is 290. Specifically, what I liked so much about him was that he was able to control the point of attack with that strength with his hands, despite being that size. But then that size did show up when it came to not even dual blocks, which I do think he's not going to be a guy who can succeed well against double teams, especially in the NFL with where he's at right now. But even solo blocks where they would have pass offs and combos up to the second level where a guy would come into his side, get hands onto him, and he wasn't able to set his feet and regain the control there while still being while the second guy left to go to the linebacker. So he was kind of removed from plays that way. So I want to see him get his core strength up. If he does that, I would say I'd be pretty high on him as a player overall.
Okay. Next, Jelani Stafford. Do you want to kick this one off, Owen?
Sure. I am actually pretty familiar with this player. He did play my beloved UB Bulls. So I had watched his tape previous to this episode. And yeah, I wasn't super high on him, not holding any grudges, just for saying UConn did bully them pretty badly. But I did like when he has a smaller frame. He's 6'1", 300. And when you get a guy who's that size, you're going to want to look to see if he can move and to be able to make it in the league. And he is one of those guys who has that get off. He has some twitch. He's able to move laterally, has some change of direction. And is one of those guys I kind of did not all around in his play style, but I did like how he was kind of sneaky good when it came to his anchor, being able to absorb some contact, get eyes in the backfield, and then use that athleticism to get off and chase plays, especially towards the outside when runs start to bounce. So he was able to win a lot with that athleticism. He had a sneaky, decent anchor personally. So he's going to be a guy who I believe can be a rotational piece for you, can come in. You're not going to be, in danger of getting absolutely destroyed if he's out there and he's your third or fourth D tackle. I just don't ever see him as like a starter. I think he isn't able to really control a point of attack with his hands as well. He can kind of neutralize it sometimes, but he's never going to get that major pushback. I didn't see much of him as a pass rusher. He's mostly a run defender in my eyes, and that mostly comes from the fact that he's able to out-athletic some of these offensive linemen he's going against and use his eyes to find the ball and then chase that ball down with his athleticism. So I wasn't that high on him. I'm not sure where these other two are going to land on him, but after having watching him, I do like him as a college level player, but when looking towards the NFL, I think he has a specific role he's going to have to fill and fit, and that's just not something that you're going to spend even a day 2 pick on.
So Newt, what do you think?
I think that Owen didn't even bring up the most impressive thing about this young man,
Go
that
ahead.
he played defensive tackle and running back in high school. And not only did he play running back in high school, he played running back for the UConn Huskies in 2023 as Refrigerator 2.0. I think they dubbed him on Twitter. What did this man have? Like 6 rushing touchdowns? 8
It was like
touchdowns?
6 or 7. Yeah, because I think you and I were chatting about it on Twitter.
The man had like 6 rushing touchdowns in 2023. Let me like preface that. I think he had a total of 22 yards. So there is a very specific package that he's going in for. But I think it was Utah State. He had a couple rushing touchdowns against, and I'm like, I'm watching that game. And so once again, Packer fan here. I remember BJ Raji, you hand the man the ball, let him pound through it. And, I wasn't alive at the time even, but you hear the stories and you've seen the video clips of the Refrigerator himself doing it. And it's not quite that. He actually, when you put the ball in his hands, you actually see some legit running back skills. He made a nice cut, was able to find the open hole, attacked it, and got there. He caught a pass in the Utah State game. You can actually see he played running back. With that, I love talking about it. It's a ton of fun that we can do that, but it's something where maybe an NFL team is like, okay, we can pop you in at a full back package if you find that. But, his bread and butters at defensive tackle. I agree with a ton of the things that Owen said already. He's someone that is not going to, put up a ton in terms of production for that top tier collegiate level and then have that translate over to the NFL. For me, one of the things I talked about that I loved about TJ Sanders was he attacked the offensive line. Jelani Stafford did not. He looked like a running back trying to play defensive tackle, where he was trying to find the opening and shoot the gap. And I think that's why he's graded so low as a pass defender, as a pass rusher, because he's just not effective. He's not aggressive. He does not have that Mauler mentality. He's someone where he's, a larger human being. He has some movement skills, but they're not adequate enough where you're going to, dip and duck and make a interior offensive lineman miss. And so he really lacked that ability to cause chaos and cause havoc. For me, I just didn't like how those aspects translated to the NFL. He's a fun player to talk about. I really, really did like that. But I've got him as a UDFA right now. I think he's fun. I think, man, if you got him on an NFL roster and if you were able to, do some cool things with him, I'd tune in and I'd watch that game. But I really don't see him as a 53-man contributor right now, unfortunately.
So Josh, what about you?
It's really hard for defensive tackles. Well, I got to measure that as barely 6 foot. I know it's like 6'1". It's really hard for defensive tackles at that threshold to be effective. You have to be an ultra athletic. And don't get me wrong, Jelani Stafford is really athletic for a defensive tackle, but you can tell he's not a defensive tackle. He's trying to make the transition. He was a better run defender in 2023 than he was in 2024, but he's just very inconsistent. His high missed tackle percentage was a big thing that I highlighted when watching his film. You can just tell that if he gets on an NFL roster, he'll be a depth piece. He'll be a guy that'll fill in. If, like, say the Lions right now, they're missing 4 or 5 guys. Jelani Stafford can go play 10, 15 snaps for the Lions tonight if he needs to. I mean, that's what we're talking about with Jelani Stafford. But I will lean in with Newt a little bit. I think he could stick to an NFL roster if he's like a converted fullback. I'm not even going to lie. He has the athletic ability, movement skills. And if he can become a better blocker as a fullback and get more comfortable somewhere like the Vikings, if they need a little CJ Ham replacement or somewhere like that, Kevin O'Connell could have a little bit of fun with Jelani Stafford. Now, granted, this is going to be a 7th round of the UDFA guy, priority free agent. This is going to be a practice squad player to see if he can make his chops in the preseason as a defensive tackle. He'll stick there as a depth piece no matter what. But if he wants to stick around in the NFL, he was a running back recruit out of high school for a reason. He might make his bread and butter as a fullback.
Okay. So, Josh, you want to start with Joshua Farmer from Florida State?
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard to talk about Florida State players in such a positive light this year, but that's self-explanatory in itself. But I didn't watch Joshua Farmer this summer going into the season. I was pleasantly surprised watching him. He just declared today, so he's coming out in the NFL draft. This is a guy you will see his name called. ACC honorable mention, even with a piss-poor season for Florida State. For me, I love his alignment versatility. He was able to be effective both as an interior and then on the edge. He looked even a little bit more comfortable on the edge for someone that big at 318. I love he's the best he's better one-on-one in pass situations. He has solid get off for his size, really impressive for his size, his movement skills. And he flashes good pad level on his rushes at times. Again, inconsistent, but he does have that ability in him. When we're talking about his run defense, he struggles to maintain gap integrity for me in his run fits. He gets out of position at times, always trying to jump into one spot or the other. Mental processing is not always there on a down-to-down basis with him. And then for me, he's got to get more comfortable using his strength and anchor and run. It's a question with run defense for me. It's not a question with his pass rush, because I think he's one of the more athletic guys for his size at this class with his versatility and is able to use his hands, swipe, and it's borderline good get off. I've graded it as solid. Just because he's 318, it's not going to be a guy that runs a 4.85 at the combine. It's going to be a guy that teeters on the 4.95 with a good 10-yard split for his size. But pass rushing upside needs to improve his run defense in my mind. But I got a draftable grade on him. This is a guy I can see in the 5th round. I have a 5th round grade on him. And for Florida State having as abysmal as a year as they had, Joshua Farmer will make a solid career for himself in the NFL, and he has the pass rushing upside. So we'll see what he turns into.
So, Owen, what do you think?
Yeah, I'll let Josh use all the technical terms for it, but I'm gonna use a phrase I've heard a lot recently with some of these D tackles I've been watching, and it's that he plays out of control at times. Where like Josh was saying with the pass rush, he has some freaky elements to his game where he has some bend that you don't expect from a 318 guy. He has some get off. He's able to move and have that pass rush upside that you look at and you're like, okay, he makes some really impressive splash plays. I think like against Cal, it was the game I watched where he looked like he was just absolutely eating up that their right guard. And I was like, oh, wow, this guy's insane. And then he'd get solo blocked or double team blocked 10 yards downfield the next play. And I'm like, all right, well, so and then when he does have some stuff like pass rush where he's winning, there's a lot of times where he's outrunning his gap integrity and he's opening up lanes for quarterbacks to step up into. So he has this raw ability to get after the quarterback, has raw athleticism where, in a year or two with some seasoning, he might be able to be a rotational, like, pass rusher for you that comes in on 3rd downs. But a lot of the stuff mentally, and especially when it comes to run defense, anchoring down, I think his anchor. I criticized what was it? Was it TJ Sanders about it? And but I think Farmer is even worse than he is. I think Sanders is more so just that he relies too much on his hands and can get bigger on his lower waist. I think Farmer just doesn't really understand how to even technically start to do that. So he has to move some of that weight more towards his lowers, as well as be able to figure out how to use that well. And yeah, just overall, I think the best way to describe him is he's talented, but he plays out of control a lot.
Yeah. No, I like that. I don't really have a ton to add. I'll just kind of highlight, strengths I had. I love his motor. I really do. I think he plays a really passionate brand of football. But just some like phrases after that, disruptive pass rush are half for his strengths. So you pop over to the other side. He gets pushed around by in run defense too easily. He's inconsistent. I think Josh used that word right there. I didn't like his vision either. I thought he lost ball runners in the backfield. And then, I watched the Cal game just like Owen did. It was funny. I watched that for Darrell Jackson Jr. And I remember kept seeing, I was like, man, who the hell's number 5? This guy is lighting it up. And it was fun as hell to watch him. But then like going back to that inconsistent play, I watched him versus, God, I can't even remember who. And it's just like, this guy's completely different. What's going on here? I think it was SMU I watched him against. And it's like, what are we doing here? So just someone that kind of leaves you scratching your head. I did write down one of the kind of cool background stories with him. And we talked about it already with Darrell Jackson Jr. came to Florida State. They actually went to high school together. So they were at Gadsden County High School together. That was kind of some of the, if you want to get into the drama of college football, like why they turned down Darrell Jackson Jr.'s waiver request to have his second transfer approved, where they said, well, you're just going to play with Josh Farmer. They played high school football together, and now they're playing back together again. And it is, when they flash and you see Darrell Jackson Jr. and Farmer play together, it's fun. Like, it's kind of cool to see them play when they're playing at a high level, but it's just the word that was said, it's out of control and inconsistent. There's not like a lot of technical refinement around it. He's got a ton of athletic ability, echo that as well, but it's just something right now where, he's not the best athlete on the field still. He does stand where he's able to play, but he's not the best athlete. He doesn't have that technical skill. He's got some ways to go. I've got him right now as a 6th, 7th rounder. I think he can make an NFL roster, but he's not someone that I'm, pounding the table for by any means. And if he were to pass by my team in the 7th round, I'd probably be like, all right, well, I can understand.
Yeah, to just to make a quick comment about what Newt said about with watching, he's one of those guys where you're watching a game, you have no idea who he is going into that game. You're watching some other player on that defense or someone on the offense, and you just see these random flash plays from number 5. And you're like, who the hell is that guy? And you look it up and like, oh, he's draft eligible, or oh, he just declared. Let me add him to my watch list. And then you go and watch his down to down tape, and you're like, oh, Jesus Christ, like, what is happening here?
It's it. Yeah, it's 100%.
For me, and Newt, you'll relate to this. That was Jack Sanborn when I was watching Wisconsin versus Notre Dame. I was a big Nick Herbig guy, and also Leo Chenal. So I'm watching those two guys.
Chenal was the one for sure.
Yeah, and then I saw Sanborn. He made a couple plays. I'm like, oh, they got another linebacker. And then I go on. I'm like, all right, well, this is like Josie Jewell, but okay.
Well, I mean, hey, like if you're gonna use the Jack Sanborn, that's LB3 for the Bears right now. He's a fairly common rotational piece in that defense. But yeah, no, I really do like that, because I mean it was honestly that I was like, who is number 5 right now? Let me check this guy out. Well, and then just like you said, you watch down and down, you're like, oh.
And it's interesting because Farmer, I don't know that he was on my board coming out of the preseason, but then I watched a Florida State game early in the year and he popped.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Like, I was like, okay, so who is he? And Buffalo needs defensive tackles. So I'm like, okay, so who is he? And Buffalo last year scouted Florida State a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So our scouts would be very familiar with him. But anyways, Newt, you want to kick off Nazir Stackhouse?
Yeah. So Nazir Stackhouse definitely fits the mold of, for me, a 2-down defensive lineman. He is a run stuffer. I'm not putting him in the Tavondre Sweat category where he's that effective. But I really, really liked watching him. Once again, go back to the Georgia-Alabama game, because that's just the only thing I ever watched, apparently. I think he holds a point of attack really well. He, double team doesn't matter. He's not moving off that point. I thought he did a really good job with that. He's not necessarily beating it, but he's going to at least hold that point and make it challenging for a running back. In one-on-one blocking, I think he knows how to use his hands to get off blockers, whether it's shedding a block to move outside or it is getting off an interior offensive lineman to disrupt the flow of the run. I think he plays really heads up. He's always looking for the run or the ball runner, or if not, if he's in pass rush, his hands are up every single time. I would love it to equate to some form of production. He doesn't have a batted ball all year, so I don't know if it's just good technique that they're teaching at Georgia, or if it's just him, kind of making that attempt every single time, just coming up fruitless. I like his kind of pass rush game where it's kind of growing to. It's not great, but he's like making baby steps there. He's got a nice rip counter move that he'll put on. But just all in all, he's got to improve his technique. It's like he's got a little bit of knowledge, but there's no real refinement there. He was another one in pass rush. Like, he's not nearly as bad for me as Stafford, but he dances when he's trying to pass rush. He's not engaged. He's not attacking the offensive lineman. And kind of I don't know, something that maybe I looked into it tomorrow. It looked a little bit more over exaggerated for me. He seemed like he got winded really quickly. Like, his conditioning for me, I didn't think was where it needed to be. Like, I watched the first quarter of the game with him, and it's like he's overly aggressive. He's really, really doing a lot of things to press the offensive lineman, to press Roberts or Booker. And then after that, it's like he almost uses the passing downs as a way to catch his breath. Once again, I don't know if it's me just kind of like looking into it a little much, but he really looked like he needed to improve his conditioning. I see him with a ton of potential as an early down lineman. I think I'm a little harsher on him with respect to some of those technical pieces and that conditioning. I mentioned already last year with T'Vondre Sweat. I don't think he's T'Vondre Sweat. I was a little bit lower on T'Vondre Sweat last year. I had him as a 3rd round grade. I've got Stackhouse as like a 4th, 5th round grade. I think he's a rotational piece. I think I'm going to be lower on him than most people. I think he does really good at that first down run stuffing. But if he doesn't improve that conditioning, which, you talk about technical ability, I expect that to improve for any player. Athleticism, I don't expect that to improve. That's just a God-given gift for most players. Conditioning, that's the will of the player right there. And right now, if you're playing your 4th year, 5th year at Georgia and you're still struggling with that kind of makes me wonder a little bit what your ability at the next level to be relevant and effective is. So I'm probably a little lower on him with the 4th, 5th-ish round grade, probably more 4th, but I think he's got the ability to be a 2-down defensive lineman at the next level, possibly even with a little bit of time at starting 2-down defensive lineman.
Josh, how about you?
Sometimes when you go over scouting reports of guys, it's really like 10 words you need to say and nothing more. Nazir Stackhouse is one of those guys, like Newt alluded to. This is a first, second down guy, good run support, very good play strength. He has good leverage when he has conditioning. When he starts to get tired on the field, that leverage starts to go down, especially when you see it in pass rush. That's why you see him always going for batted balls so much, because he's never staying low to the ground. He's always high up out of his legs. And yes, to Newt's point, he has improved his willingness and use of hands and trying to develop some type of pass rush arsenal, but he's not going to provide little to nothing to the NFL as a pass rusher. And I've grown up a Georgia fan my whole life, so I am biased towards Georgia guys. There is a role for Nazir Stackhouse in the NFL. He will get drafted, and he will play on early downs in the NFL. But that's all you're going to ask of him. And more than likely or not, that's going to be his NFL career. Day 3 guy, excels in run support. This is a guy that's definitely going to get drafted. I have him 5th to 6th round grade, but yeah, little to nothing. He's going to bring you in pass rush.
Oh,
I said, Josh, that makes me feel so much better. I thought I was going to be the only one that was lower on him. Like I said, I mean, I was hesitant to say that 4th to 5th round grade. I feel a little bit better that, like, especially you.
I appreciate that you guys are giving just, let's say, candid, like, because to the best of my knowledge, you guys haven't really reviewed your grades with each other. You're just presenting them on the show. To me, that's the best content, but we got to give Owen a chance to tell us what he thinks.
Yeah, I'm just to put it out there first before getting into it. I am also there with a 4th-round grade. With you guys, I just but Jim, this is our guy. This is if you're looking for a guy to come in and replace Daquan Jones in 2 years, this is the guy.
Yeah.
I know we talked a lot about how he's just kind of this run stuffer. I think he does a great job taking on blocks, whether it's with his hands or using his core strength and not being moved off the spot. That's what he does, and using his eyes to find the ball. He does get a bit lazy with it towards the 4th quarter. It also doesn't help that Georgia's usually up a lot in 4th quarters, so it's a lot of pass rushing. So it's not a lot up of his wheelhouse. So he's not as dialed in. But if I'm a team like the Bills who need to find a guy who's going to be that kind of run stuffing complement to an Ed Oliver or a Dwayne Carter, I'm drafting him in the 4th round. I guess you can maybe stretch it to the late 3rd if there's a squeeze on the position, but this is like the exact kind of player you're looking for. And if I'm drafting him, I'm not even going to ask him to try to improve as a pass rusher, to be honest with you. You know what he's good at. You know what he excels at. And even if he can improve a little bit here or there as a pass rusher, it's never going to be something he's dynamic at or makes his name on in the NFL. So you ask him to be an early down run stuffer, use what he already has in his toolbox, get some better conditioning on him, or at least make sure that that's something is an issue of more just him not being totally locked in all the way through the game because of that situational football. And you just ask him to continue to improve on that. And if he's out there during passing down, just grab 2 O linemen and squeeze that pocket. Like don't worry about it.
So Newt, did Green Bay just score?
Yeah, what happened?
Green Bay did not score. They stopped the Lions 4th and 1 on the Lions 30-yard line. Dan Campbell's gamble did not stand up.
Oh,
why would they go for that?
Some steps. Look at him.
Because it's Dan Campbell, man.
Yeah,
I mean,
So Owen, on last night's podcast, a different Bills analyst was doing scouting reports, and we were doing edge and offensive tackle. The number 1 Bills scouted school is Clemson, and they have DeMonte Capehart. So when we do DeMonte Capehart, that's probably Brandon Beane's guy.
Okay. I'll keep that in the back pocket.
Yep. Okay, so
I got a question. All right, no, I got not a question. I got one thing I have to add to Nazir Stackhouse. It's gonna be the dumbest part of this podcast. Me and him have the same birthday, so I will forever be tied to this man. If he has a long NFL career, I'll see that tweet hopefully come through. Whoever he's at, Nazir Stackhouse birthday. I'll be like, it's my birthday. I had to share it. I'm sorry. I saw it on George's website. I had to share it.
Yeah. So, and you want to kick off Walter Nolen, and I know this is one of Joe Marino's guys. So
I say, yeah, he's not been as into the draft stuff recently, but yeah, whenever he does talk about it, he's talking about Walter Nolen, and this is kind of one of the guys that I had because of that kind of exposure to him. I had him really talked up to. I was coming to this kind of with higher expectations for him, and I don't think he didn't meet it personally. I don't know if I have to see what these other two have to say about this, but I am particularly high on him, especially kind of taking what we said earlier about D tackles who are either pass rushers or run defenders, and we have a mix of guys who are great athletes and other guys who you just know what they are. Nolen being 305, bigger than what was that? TJ that was 290. We have Nolen here. He's kind of in that similar mode where he's this twitched up, athletic guy. He can explode out of his stance. He has a high motor. He's constantly playing through contact. I really liked how they used him in different alignments where they lined him up as a 5-tech. He slid over into a 1-tech on occasion, which I would prefer using him there. But 3-tech, 5-tech, he was out in a wide edge in a couple of snaps there. So they used him all over, and that's what a lot of these good colleges do. And the fact that he's in that position at an SEC school and specifically a good D-line with Ole Miss where they're just getting him a position to succeed and trying to weaponize him as much as they can. It kind of says a lot for him. I liked a lot about his profile. The fact that he is 305 instead of 290 and still can move like that. I did like the power he was able to bring with his rushes. I think the fact that the explosiveness to power transition is always something that I will always covet, especially if they can use it in their upper body, which is something that I think no one can do really well. And I do think he showed some high IQ plays, especially when it comes to putting himself in positions to succeed when it comes to not being able to make immediate impacts on the ball. The only thing I have to say for Nolen is I wasn't the biggest fan of his pass rush package right now, like his plans. A lot of the time you see guys who are super athletic, they come in, they find some things that work, and they also just don't have to really rely on beating guys with specific moves. And the fact that he's able to out athlete some of these SEC linemen, I did like. You like to see that, but I felt like I wanted to see it just a little bit more. Other than that, though, I feel like he's pretty much like he's a bona fide round one guy for me. He's just a super athlete that I would want on my team no matter what.
Newt, what do you think of Walter Nolen?
I'm really glad that Owen said all of that because I thought I was going to be the only one on the show with a true one grade on Walter Nolen, and here's I'm not. I really like Walter Nolen. So Walter Nolen's definitely right now, if you look at him, he plays the run way better than he plays the pass, but that's not that he plays the pass bad. It's that he lacks some of the nuance to play the pass currently. Don't confuse that for Nazir Stackhouse. Nazir Stackhouse is a zero tech. He's going to be that nose tackle that's just like, hey, pop me in the middle and I'm just going to cause hell. Fine. Walter Nolen does not play that. Owen already alluded to kind of his versatility up and down the line. He's playing that 3 tech, 5 tech a ton. But he's going to be someone that is going to be disruptive in the pass game. I popped on the LSU game for him. Literally the first play of the game, he pushes back the center 4 yards, causes the running back to cut to the side, and doesn't make the tackle himself, but completely blows the play up. He's someone that, while he's right now more of a run defender in terms of how he's grading out, how he's being effective at the collegiate level, he is incredibly athletic. He is a high motor player. He's someone that is going to be able to be a coachable player, and you're going to be able to put in a system right away. Say, hey, you're out there first and second down. You're doing what you do. And then we're working with you this year to get you out there all 3 downs for a stellar NFL career. I've got written down for him stellar athleticism. He's a Bruce Feldman's freaks list player. He's got speed, power, and leverage. I think he hits that sweet spot at 6'3" for both length, but being able to create leverage against offensive linemen. And I already mentioned the motor that he plays with. The only dings I have against him are going to be the polish to his pass rush game, the technique he needs to add, and the coaching he needs to get from that. And just his ability to play out of control a little bit at times. It's not a bad thing. He's a passionate player, but he needs to play a little bit more heads-up football. I talk about players that have their eyes on the ball constantly. And for him, it's not necessarily that. Sometimes he moves away from the ball just because he wants to get there. But, I look at what he's doing. He's already developing a bag of pass rush moves, rip, swim move, pull, push, bull rush, spin. I think I shared a clip on Twitter where he puts a swim move and then a spin counter and is able to get at Nuss and force a hurry at the end of the second quarter of LSU game. And it was just like, man, this is awesome. Can you get under a coaching system where they're able to teach you how to put these moves in effectively, when to use them, how to apply them to be a really, really effective pass rusher at the next level and create a really, really good 3-down lineman. So right now, I think he's a 2-down lineman with a huge ceiling to grow into a very, very disruptive interior defensive player. I have a true first-round grade on him. Right now, I've got him ranked number 20 on my big board.
So, Josh, how about you?
Nolen's going to go in the first round. And for me, I'm a little lower than you guys. I got him 37 on my big board. So right in that threshold of in my mind, he's like a borderline late first, early second, but one of those guys, he's going to go in the first round. I'm not going to have a problem with it one single bit. You guys have already highlighted his goods. I like how young he is. I love his versatility. I love his athletic ability. It all shines on tape, and it shined since he was a freshman at Texas A&M. Everybody knew what he had in him. For me, I hold him to a little bit of a higher standard. I want to see the chops and rips used more efficiently. He has it in him. Just use it. Stay in control a little bit more. You have all the ability in the world. Just show it on the down-to-down consistency so you can show to people who are naysayers like me a little bit that you're a true 3-down lineman right away first into the NFL. But after a year of development in the NFL, I have no doubt that he's going to be an above-average starter to a Pro Bowler right away. So that's why my 37th ranked on my big board to early second round, I have like an eerie feeling about, but that's how my grading scale is. The only other nitpick thing I'll say, I want him to improve his hand striking when he gets out of his stance in the run game. At times, I want him to make that pure strike instead of using his athletic ability to get around and get into phase to make a play. If he can create movement, displacement with his use of hands, because he's got that power with his hand, it's all there for Nolen. And he's going to get taken in the first round, and he's going to develop into a really good player in my mind because of that motor, because of that athletic ability, because of how young he is, because of that versatility. And I think he's a better pass rusher than you guys are giving him credit for. But I just hold him to a higher standard. I want to see all the tools in the bag being used efficiently at the right times instead of him always trying to go for a bull or him trying to stick to one move the whole entire game instead of diversifying a little bit. Because he can line up as a 2-eye, 3-tech, all the way out on the edge. He brings everything that you're looking for a true 3-down defensive lineman. It's just put it all together, and he's still young. He has time to do it. That's why if he goes back for another year, even though he's going to be a high draft pick this year, could benefit his development in the long term, because his first year in the NFL, he's going to be feeling his way out, playing with a high motor, going 100% of the time, not really understanding what he's doing all the time, but always going 100% full force. Kind of like, not on the Jalen Carter tier, but like Jalen Carter, his first 6 games as a rookie, just going full all out until he realized, okay, I need to stay in control a little bit, use my powers to my advantage. Yeah. But love everything about Walton Nolen. I wish my grading scale lets him go into a first round for me. I have him as my 37th player. He's right there for me. But yeah, that's nothing to take away from him.
Okay, so I have a question on Walter Nolen and the size profile, because I've pretty much heard 3-tech, 5-tech. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking that normally when a defensive tackle goes round 1, they can play a 0 or a 1. Mm-hmm. The 2 exceptions that I can think of are Ed Oliver and Kalijah Cansey. Can you think of other 3-techs that have gone like top 20? And I don't even know that Cansey went top 20.
Cansey went 15.
Yeah, Cansey did. And Cansey was really undersized for his position. He was just...
Yeah, Cansey was like, what, 6 foot, 6'1" or something like that?
Yeah, he just had those really rare movement abilities, and it obviously translated to the NFL. Wolin's kind of like that. And he's like you said with Ed Oliver, he's like right on that cusp of Ed Oliver as player.
I think so. For me, if I look at that, I'm not necessarily looking at a guy that has to be able to play 0-tech. I really don't think I'd want to see a guy taken in the top 20 that's like pigeonholed to that. Mm-hmm. Not that like that wouldn't be awesome, but I mean, even if you look at Byron Murphy's making his career at 3-tech. Like, he is going to be that guy that is playing between the guard and tackle, that is really disrupting the game right there. He's not, stuffing up that middle. That's why I truly think that he's so much more of a versatile player over Devondre Sweat. Devondre Sweat has a lot more pieces that go behind him. Obviously, he's really been able to make the most of it at the start of his NFL career. But I really like that 3-tech spot in terms of a versatile player over someone that weights more towards that A-gap player.
And Owen, what were you going to add?
I was going to say, like, there's also historical ones, like Aaron Donald went top 10 as a guy who was famously undersized and wasn't going to be considered. I mean, he ended up growing into someone who could play for, that different kind of role, but was never like believed to be that kind of guy. Just looking at this list here, I'm looking at drafthistory.com. They have a list of all the picks made, and I filtered it by D tackles. Devontae Wyatt, I wouldn't argue that he was like strictly a 3-tech, but in that Georgia front, he was definitely more
as a Packer fan. I can say Devontae Wyatt shouldn't have been a first-round pick. Let's just put that out there right now.
I mean, I was there with you when they drafted him, but I wasn't going to say that. Javon Kinlaw,
we can toss that out there right now. I like Devontae Wyatt's all right, but not a first-round pick.
You also got guys like Javon Kinlaw, who was also seen as that kind of like maybe more tweener guy. I'm just looking down this list. Taven Bryan, a bunch of guys where it's more towards the back half where like you have your special cases with Ed Oliver and Aaron Donald and Kalijah Cansey, even where they're getting drafted higher because they have that special level of athleticism, similar to like what we think Walter Nolen possesses. He could, especially with a great combine, move up into that stratosphere. I'm personally ready to take him that high at this moment, just because I'm so high on him as an athlete, especially being at 305. Because you look at guys like Cansey and Oliver, who were undersized, but they were like significantly so. Where Oliver was like playing a nose tackle at 285 at Houston, and he still got drafted in the top 10. Mm-hmm. Whereas Nolen is 6'3", 305, and he's able to go in and bang with SEC inside guards and centers, and then go out and forklift South Carolina offensive tackles. So it's like you're not really questioning. With Oliver, there was questions and he still landed there. At this point with Nolen, yeah, you want to see him get, cultured up a little more when it comes to where he uses technique. But when there's less question marks with him than there is some other guys who are not able to really fill that kind of interior run stuffing role, kind of like a Jordan Davis or some of these other bigger guys we've seen, like a Dexter Lawrence. The reason those guys go higher is because it's a lot rarer to find a guy who's that size, but can also do some of the other stuff. You find a lot more Nazir Stackhouses than you do Dexter Lawrences. Exactly. Whereas you can find some 3 techs that can make an impact, like Draymond Jones or something like that in like second, third round.
I got a question. I don't know, Josh or Owen, have you guys gotten a chance to look at, elephant in the room, Mason Graham, but also Kenneth Grant and Deion Walker, and I guess Derek Harmon as well. Have any of you guys gotten a chance to look at those 4?
Graham is the cream of the crop for me. Nolen is my interior defensive lineman too, and that could change. He could get into the first round for me. I might bias him into the first round just because love Kenneth Grant's potential. Just got to clean it up with his leverage for me. I'm not a Deontay Walker guy. I don't think I'll ever be a Deion Walker guy. And Derek Harmon has been probably the most consistent interior defensive lineman this entire year. I have him as a round 2 grade firm. I think he's on the lower half of round 2, and then he'll fall into round 3 probably, and then somebody's going to take him with the first 5 picks of round 3, and then get a really solid two different contract player play for 10 plus years. That's what I see in Derek Harmon, but I am not a Deontay Walker guy. I'll probably never be.
No, honestly that fits a lot of the thing. Like, I mean, Graham, Nolen, Grant right now for me sit there. I got Derek Harmon, but Deanna Walker's lower for me. But I was just kind of wondering, especially those 3 of the 2 Michigan guys, how Nolen fit in there with you.
Yeah. So here's the
Owen, what do you got
for next week? So next week, it's Grant, Walker, Howard Cross, Joey Slackman, Derek Harmon.
Oh,
so we're gonna hit 3 of the guys you just mentioned.
Yep.
The week after, and that would be the final episode, Mason Graham, Dominique Orange, Jordan Birch, Tonka Hemingway, Yaya Black, and Darius Alexander. And I have to go back and double check to make sure that I haven't left a higher ranked player off the list, because some of those guys are smaller school guys.
Yeah. I'm gonna put a caveat for you guys next week. Howard Cross is not going to fit the athletic profile for you guys, but trust the tape. That's like my firm stamp of my real guy in this class, and he'll go like the 100th pick or early day 3. But don't discount Howard Cross's just because of the size profile.
He plays right next to one of Newt's guys.
Yeah.
We've been going for almost 2 hours. I promise that no other episodes are going to go this long. We had 3 people, and we covered maybe 2 or 3 more people than we normally do. So I do want to say thank you to everybody that is watching. There's many of you out there, so thank you very much. But we are going to shut this down so Newt can watch the 4th quarter of his game. And
Packers are up 28-24 right now.
Oh my!
Well, for how much longer?
What is the score, Newt?
28-24 with 9 minutes left in the 4th quarter. Detroit's 3rd and goal at the 1 yard line right now. So
it's going in.
We got to go watch Packers Lions, everybody. Thank you very much.
See you guys.
Thank you for watching this episode of the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast, brought to you by Draft Professor. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Please like the podcast on YouTube. Please follow us on Twitter at NFL Draft Fanatic. Thank you again for watching. On behalf of everybody that put this podcast together, We appreciate our followers very, very much. And we look forward to seeing you on a future podcast.